For most of Carson, Ohio, he was just Mr. Earl, the man who pushed the mop through City Hall's empty marble halls long after the lights went dim, a worn denim cap always pulled low over his gray-streaked eyes, and a faded keyring that clinked like a metronome through the building's silence. Earl Simmons had been the night janitor for over 25 years, cleaning up after people who didn't know his name, clearing the trash of men in suits who made decisions that shaped the lives of thousands. He never asked for much. Just his shift, his coffee, and his quiet. But few knew Earl's past. Before life broke him down and took his wife in a hit-and-run that was never solved, before he stopped talking more than a few words at a time, Earl had once been a military intelligence analyst with a mind for patterns and a gift for remembering everything. But after the loss, he walked away from that life and settled into one where no one expected anything from him, until he started noticing things. It began with something small, a shredded document in the mayor's trash bin that hadn't been properly destroyed. Earl never intended to read it, but the bold title caught his eye. Redirected Funds, Infrastructure Budget. The document showed $2.4 million labeled as park renovation, being funneled to a company he didn't recognize, Luma Development. Curious, he searched the trash again and found another half-torn invoice from the same company, this time linked to school roof maintenance. But he knew the school hadn't been touched in over a year. In fact, a student had slipped on that leaking roof just weeks ago. His memory clicked like an old engine sputtering to life. The name Luma Development returned in another memory, 2 months ago, in a conversation between the deputy mayor and the city accountant who assumed Earl was out of earshot. "Luma's the reason we're all getting bonuses this year," the accountant had laughed. "Just keep it off paper." Earl hadn't thought much of it then, but now it throbbed in his mind like an alarm. Something wasn't right. Over the next few weeks, he began doing what came naturally, observing. He didn't make noise. He just watched, listened, collected. He took photos of files left unattended, jotted down meeting notes scribbled on whiteboards before they were erased, memorized login patterns on computers left unlocked, and began building a quiet timeline of misuse, lies, and funneling schemes. City council meetings bragged about record-setting investments in the community, but behind the scenes, Earl saw fake invoices, padded budgets, and renovation projects that existed only on paper. The deeper he looked, the clearer it became. The mayor and her inner circle had created a web of shell companies and backdoor agreements that had redirected over $18 million of taxpayer money into private accounts, all under the guise of revitalization. The people of Carson were told they were getting new roads, safer schools, and affordable housing. But Earl knew none of it was real. Just lines on spreadsheets for press conferences. When he found a black binder labeled Q4 Adjustments, nearly tossed into a shred bin, it confirmed everything. Fraudulent accounts, code-named payoffs, and a document listing a 12% admin handling fee tied directly to the mayor's cousin. The city was being robbed, and no one was watching, except the janitor. Earl didn't sleep much those nights. After his shift, he'd walk the 10 blocks to his rented apartment, eat cold leftovers, and spend the early hours organizing what he'd found, naming photos, scanning crumpled papers he'd rescued from the trash, highlighting text in scanned PDFs, and labeling folders like Luma, Q4 fraud, cash transfers. He had no formal training in whistleblowing, but his time in military intel had taught him how to build a case, how to track movements, how to document everything so it couldn't be denied. He kept multiple copies, one on an old USB drive, another uploaded to a private cloud, and a physical backup hidden in a shoebox under the floorboards. Still, he was scared. Not for himself, he had long since stopped caring much about his own well-being, but for the city, for the kids walking to schools with collapsing ceilings, for the elderly who paid higher property taxes while fake contractors drained the budget. And more than anything, he feared what would happen if someone found out what he was doing, because now he was hearing whispers. One night, while cleaning the break room, Earl heard 2 junior staffers talking. "You hear about Daniels? From zoning? Gone. Transferred to Nevada overnight. Guess he asked too many questions about the Luma reports. The name Daniels triggered a memory. He had seen Daniels's initials on several audit footnotes. Another potential ally. Erased. Earl knew time was running out. He had to act, but he had no voice, no platform, no allies, until he remembered a woman named Elena Vega. She'd once been a local journalist for the Carson Chronicle, now demoted to lifestyle reporting after she published a piece questioning campaign donations during the last mayoral race. People called her washed up, but Earl knew better. She had guts, and more importantly, she had nothing left to lose. That night, he left a manila envelope on her car windshield outside her apartment building. Inside were only 3 things: a photocopy of a forged invoice, a list of names tied to suspicious fund transfers, and a note that said, "If you still believe in truth, meet me. Midnight. Level 2. Parking garage. City Hall. Come alone." He signed it only with the letter E. At midnight, she showed up. No camera crew, no notepad, just a flashlight and caution in her eyes. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Just a janitor," he replied. "But I see everything." And then he gave her the first drive. Just a taste. Enough to prove this wasn't conspiracy theory. It was data, documents, audio. Her hands trembled as she clicked through folders on her laptop in the backseat of her car. She asked questions. Earl answered with dates, names, departments, bank codes. Elena didn't go public right away. She spent 2 weeks verifying, digging, cross-referencing public budgets with Earl's data. When she found that Luma Development's office address led to an abandoned warehouse outside of town, she knew he was telling the truth. She pitched the story to her editor, but they rejected it, called it too political, too dangerous. So she did what every brave reporter does when no one listens. She went independent. She launched a Substack called Bleeding Carson and uploaded part 1 of the exposé. The city built on lies. It exploded online. The story was shared across Facebook groups, neighborhood forums, local Reddit pages. Residents began commenting with their own stories. Road repairs that never happened, community grants that vanished, senior housing buildings promised but never built. And suddenly, Earl's silence began shaking the city's foundation. By the end of the week, the mayor's office was in panic mode. The city issued a bland press release dismissing the article as fabricated content with malicious intent, but the people weren't buying it. Neighborhood leaders were demanding public audits. Anonymous tip lines flooded with new claims. And somewhere inside City Hall, someone knew they had a leak. Security footage was reviewed. Employee logs were checked. Earl noticed the sudden shift, glances lasting too long. Locked rooms that were once open. Whispers that stopped when he passed. One night, while cleaning a third-floor conference room, he found his cart had been tampered with. Papers gone, his lock broken. He said nothing. Just took the cart down to the basement storage room, where he kept his real backup. 2 full printed ledgers, wrapped in plastic, hidden behind unused paint buckets marked for disposal. He moved them to a safer place that night, into a locker at the old train station. Long abandoned, its key now resting under a loose brick behind his apartment building. Earl wasn't paranoid, he was prepared. And it turned out he had to be, because 3 nights later, a black SUV followed him home. It didn't approach, just parked 2 houses down. Lights off, engine running. It stayed there until 2:16 a.m., then disappeared. He logged the plate number. It didn't come up in any public registry. That same week, Elena published part 2 of the exposé. Names behind the numbers. This time, she named the mayor's cousin, the city treasurer, 2 prominent developers, and the ghost companies receiving public funds. She cited real bank transfers, wire records, audit reports, and even a leaked email referencing a meeting about relocation plans if things heat up. She didn't reveal Earl, but she quoted an anonymous insider with decades of first-hand knowledge. The story caught fire. This time, local news stations picked it up. City Hall was flooded with interview requests, protesters lined the steps, and the mayor canceled her weekly media address for the first time in 6 years. By Friday, the state comptroller had ordered an emergency audit of Carson's public spending records. And in the middle of it all, Earl still showed up to work on time, head down, cart rolling, mop bucket sloshing softly through marble corridors as TV cameras flashed just outside the building. To most, he was still invisible. But one person noticed. A new temp assistant, young, nervous, stopped him near the elevator. "Was it really you?" she asked. "Did you send those files?" Earl didn't flinch. "What do you think?" he said. She smiled, like she'd just seen a real-life superhero. Word had begun to spread through staff. They knew. And for the first time in decades, Earl wasn't just the janitor. He was a legend. Still, he wasn't done. He passed Elena the last and final drive, the one with everything. Audio from 2 council members talking bribes, emails scheduling fake site visits, documents revealing nearly $63 million in diverted funds over 11 years. And the crown jewel, a signed contract between the mayor's office and a Cayman Islands holding company, clearly marked as Consulting Housing Project B1, which never existed outside of 3 Photoshop renderings. Elena knew this was it. The bombshell. She contacted legal counsel and spent 5 days building a watertight public release. Then, at 9:02 a.m. on a Monday morning, she published it all under the title, How Carson Was Stolen. Within hours, the story made national headlines. CNN, NPR, MSNBC all ran segments. Hashtags trended. The governor made a statement calling it a betrayal of the people. And quietly, agents from the FBI arrived in Carson. The FBI didn't come in quietly. They walked into City Hall with warrants in hand, agents in jackets marked with yellow letters, and within hours, they seized documents, hard drives, and security footage while the city watched in disbelief. The mayor was escorted out the back to avoid the cameras, but not before Earl saw her face. No longer smug or composed, just pale, eyes darting. The face of someone who'd realized the empire she built on lies had begun to burn. Within a week, indictments were filed. 7 arrests followed. News vans lined the courthouse. Earl's name still hadn't been mentioned publicly, but within City Hall, the truth was undeniable. Everyone knew who had lit the match. Elena refused to reveal her source, even under pressure. But the legend of the janitor who brought down a government was already spreading through whispered staff chats, school teachers quoting him in class, and seniors passing out copies of the exposé at town halls. And yet, Earl stayed quiet. When his name finally leaked, ironically, through a reporter misquoting an assistant, the media swarmed his apartment. He answered no doorbells. He refused interviews. But one night, just before dawn, he left a handwritten letter outside Elena's door. It read, "This wasn't about revenge. It was about responsibility. They stole from people who couldn't afford to lose. I just wanted someone to notice. I didn't think it'd be me." And with that, Earl left Carson. Some said he moved to Oregon to live with a niece. Others claimed he took a night job at a library in Kansas, sweeping floors again, watching people pass by unnoticed. But his story didn't fade. Schools began using his case in ethics classes. A small plaque now hangs outside the janitor's closet at Carson City Hall. Bronze, modest, with the words, "Dedicated to the citizen who saw what others ignored and acted anyway." His legend only grew. One of the children from the school with the collapsed roof, a girl named Naomi, grew up to become a state representative. She credits Earl in every speech she gives about integrity. And Elena, now a respected national journalist, still carries the first drive he gave her, scratched and faded, in her laptop bag. "It reminds me why I started," she says. "Because truth is always somewhere, usually in the places we don't think to look." Every now and then, someone leaves flowers by the janitor's closet. No one knows who. Maybe an old co-worker. Maybe one of the many lives changed by Earl's decision to notice. His story is proof that heroes don't always wear uniforms, don't speak at podiums, and don't post what they do. Sometimes they mop floors at 3 a.m. with aching knees and haunted memories, carrying the weight of a world they no longer believe in, but still, somehow, refuse to let fall apart. And in that silence, in that soft persistence, lies a power most people will never understand. Earl Simmons didn't save the world, but he saved a city. and sometimes that's more than enough. Years passed, but Earl Simmons's legacy did not fade. In fact, it only grew stronger with time. Carson City, once known for potholes and press conferences, slowly transformed into a symbol of redemption and grassroots justice. Reforms were passed in the wake of the scandal. Transparency laws, independent auditing boards, and a citizens' budget review council named in Earl's honor. But more than policy, his quiet defiance became a lesson in civic courage. High schools across Ohio began including his story in government curriculum, calling it The Power of One. A local filmmaker created a short documentary about him titled The Custodian of Truth, which won an award at a regional festival. Still, no one knew exactly where Earl had gone. Rumors spread. He was seen volunteering at a hurricane shelter in Louisiana, reading to kids at a small-town library in Montana, or even quietly sweeping the steps of a veteran's home in Pennsylvania. But no photo was ever confirmed, no interview ever accepted, and Earl never returned to Carson. Until one day, 5 years later, during a quiet unveiling of the new Civic Ethics Center built on the ashes of the demolished mayor's mansion. The crowd was small, mostly students, city workers, and a few old reporters. There were no cameras, no major press. But an older man in a worn denim cap and steel-toed boots stood quietly at the back, arms folded. He didn't speak. He simply listened as a young woman at the podium, Naomi Taylor, now a state legislator, recounted the events that had shaped her future. "I used to think people like us didn't have power," she said, her voice cracking slightly. But one man with no office, no spotlight, and no help, changed everything. He didn't do it with speeches. He did it with silence, with consistency, with conviction. As the small crowd clapped, the man in the cap turned and walked away before anyone could approach him. But one kid in the crowd, a young janitor working part-time to pay for school, ran after him. "Sir," the boy shouted, "are you him? Are you Mr. Simmons?" Earl paused, turned, and offered only a nod. "Why'd you do it?" the boy asked. "Why risk everything just to tell the truth?" Earl looked at him for a long moment, then said, "Because the lie was heavier than the risk." Then he placed a folded note in the boy's hand and walked down the steps, disappearing once more into the world he never asked to be part of. That note now sits framed in the Ethics Center's entrance. It reads, "The most powerful people are the ones you never notice, until it's too late to ignore them." Since then, cities across the country have reported anonymous leaks exposing shady deals, embezzlement, and corruption. Many of them coming from low-level employees, inspired by a man they've never met. In New Jersey, a school custodian exposed a test score manipulation scheme. In Texas, a parking garage attendant revealed a city contract fraud. In Arizona, a lunch lady uncovered missing food supply funding. Each time, local papers ran the same headline: "Another Janitor Speaks." Earl Simmons had become more than a man. He became a symbol. His story was not one of revenge or rebellion. It was about responsibility, about what happens when someone decides that silence is no longer an option, even when the world tells them they don't matter. He never asked for recognition. He didn't want applause. He just wanted people to remember that truth still exists in quiet corners, where no one's looking, waiting for someone to notice. And when the final history of Carson City is written, it won't be about the corrupt mayors or greedy developers. It will begin with a man, a mop, and a decision that changed everything. A decision made not out of anger, but out of love. For justice, for people, and for a city that forgot. It belonged to the people. And that is the story of the janitor who took down City Hall, and reminded America that heroes don't need microphones, just the courage to keep cleaning up messes they didn't make.